pleasure to have Dieula. I'm gonna do the little French with the lips and everything.
Exactly. Do it. Do it. I think that would make me very happy because not too many people can pronounce my name correctly. And so I give them a phonetic pronunciation, which is kind of close. So
Yeah,
Jrla, it's kind of close.
Dieula.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
love it. So you're from Haiti.
I
So
am.
was French your first language? Like, do you still talk at home or not really?
French was not the first language I learned. I learned Creole as the first
Okay.
language. And so French is spoken in the schools and government. So it's the national language, but the language spoken in the homes, it's kind of close to French, but it's not French. And so there's
Ah.
enough words in Creole that's similar to French, and it follows some of the same grammar as French, but not necessarily French.
Oh wow. Yeah. Isn't it kind of a little bit like the dialect that people talk in New Orleans a little bit? Does it come from that same root?
So yeah, there is a connection with New Orleans and Haitians.
Mhm.
So the history of New Orleans, if the not the Emancipation Proclamation, the Louisiana Purchase was
Right.
so because of the Haitian Revolution. And so you
Mhm.
had a lot of Haitians freed slaves at that time that came to New Orleans. So you do have the blending of the Louisiana French or Creole there,
Uh-huh.
but the Creole is still somewhat different. I think
Yeah.
we're the only ones with that particular Creole. There
Mhm.
are some other islands that speak Creole as well, but their Creole is still a little bit different enough that it can confuse you at times, but you can get by. Like Saint
Yeah.
Lucia and some of those other islands, you can hear some Creole.
It's so, I'm fascinated with languages and
Me
cultures. I
too.
just love like how God made us so uniquely different, and
Exactly.
and just I love that. I celebrate all of those
Me
different
too.
cultures.
Me
They
too.
make us human race. It's wonderful.
I tell people I'm a child of the world because I just love, I feel at home in the world when I'm learning
Yes.
about different languages and cultures and how people live and how people, hurt and how they heal and all of
Yes.
that. It's just where I'm created to be.
Absolutely. And I know that you do a beautiful job doing that already. You are a daughter of immigrants, right?
Yes, yes.
And I see that you're still in. Did your parents migrate to the New Jersey area? Because I know that that's where you are, right?
Yes, I'm in New Jersey currently. My parents originally migrated to Brooklyn.
Okay.
And so from Brooklyn, after 10 years of living in Brooklyn, they then moved to New Jersey. There's a 10-year separation from my parents' immigration story and mine. And so we came and met my parents in New Jersey. So we never lived in Brooklyn. We just lived in New Jersey. Yeah,
Oh, that's it. So they came first and you followed them,
exactly.
which
10
is a
years later.
very common. I'm originally from Brazil, and so I met my husband in Brazil, so I got married and moved here. But
Okay,
but I know several Brazilians who that's exactly what happens to them. They come here to work, and
exactly.
they're separated from their children sometimes
Yeah,
for a long time. It just
exactly.
breaks my heart to see the
Yeah,
stories, but then you see the sacrifices. That's something that you mentioned, about your parents, and
exactly.
they did the sacrifices so that they could give you a better
Mhm.
life. And I know you're eternally thankful for that.
I am. I am. The immigrant story is a story filled with trauma,
Mhm.
for everyone. The parents who are leaving, the children who are left behind, the children that are born in the new country. the disconnection for like years upon years. And then even more trauma when they reunite,
Mm,
so it's a story filled with trauma, and which is one of the reasons I wrote the book, because in my heart, I want people to have a sensitivity, um, compassion for those stories, you
absolutely.
know. And my thing is, what I always say is that people would not leave their land if there wasn't an issue or situation, a tension that was forcing them to leave, right? And so,
Yes,
yeah.
Gila, you just reminded me of something. With all the immigration issues going on right now, with the borders and all the
Yeah,
thousands of people that are
yeah.
crossing the borders. And so I don't know, about a couple months ago, it was right when there was something especially was happening, that there was a flood of immigrants crossing the border.
Mm,
And so my husband and I were watching TV, and we were just like talking about the issue, about like how, I mean, how can this country receive these people, just coming by,
mm,
somebody's going to have to pay the bill, is what we were talking about. And then the TV stops in this scene, and it for the first time while talking to my husband,
mhm.
it's almost like God just opened my eyes to see what I was actually seeing.
Yeah,
And I started
yeah,
grieving. Like I
yeah,
was exactly what you said. I just saw this listen to moms with a little bitty
absolutely,
backpack, holding a little 2, 3 year old for the
absolutely.
hands, and that's exactly what I thought. I was like, the despair, the desperation that, people that are doing this, that they're just like, and we know that there are all kinds of criminals that come,
Right,
that pass
right.
the borders to, to exploit this country and for drugs, and we know
Mhm.
that. But the greatest majority is just people who are desperate, right?
They
And
are
so
desperate.
they're
They
desperate.
are
And so you
desperate.
said something, and even like, in my case was very different, because I had a good life in Brazil. My husband, I met him there, and he's American.
Mhm.
And so but that even though there were, I don't know if I can say it wasn't traumatic in a sense of like
It was like
horribly,
little T
but
trauma,
there were,
okay? Little
yes,
T
the
trauma. Mhm.
separation. I
Yeah,
was 30 years old, so I wasn't a little
yeah,
kid. I left everything behind. And
exactly.
when you said the title of your book, which by the way, here it is, Does God
Yeah,
See
does
Me?
God see
That we're
me?
going to be talking
Yeah,
about in a minute. But I could relate to this, like do these
yeah.
people see me?
Mhm.
Because even though, my skin is white,
Yeah,
I was still a Latino, a foreigner here, with an accent. And
yeah,
I felt, in several places that I went, I felt
yeah,
and still do sometimes, the
yeah,
discrimination,
yes,
and I was like, I was one of those people in my country that I had all kinds of friends, and I had a
exactly,
full life. So it
exactly.
is like, I understand this, of like when you feel so lonely, and
Mhm.
the trauma or of not having anybody that understands you, or that is your
Yeah,
friend. That the question,
yeah,
do people even see who I am, or other than just this
exactly,
stamp that people
exactly.
put on you, right?
Yeah, there's a beautiful story, and I've been teaching this story to the women in Haiti over Zoom, for the past few months on the book of Ruth, and that beautiful story of migration,
Mm-hmm.
how
Yep.
Naomi left and went to Moab. And then Naomi brought back her daughters-in-law to Bethlehem. And I'm like, this is a beautiful story
Mm-hmm.
of there's a need in my country, there's famine in my country. We can no longer stay. So we're going to go to Moab to find resources, to find life.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're in Moab, their children get married,
Right.
and now it's time for her to come back because she's lost everything It's time for her to come back. Who comes with her? Ruth, who's a foreigner,
Yes.
you know?
Now she's the foreigner.
Now she's a
Yes.
foreigner in her country.
Yeah.
And who takes care of her? Boaz, right? And
Yes.
Boaz gives us the example of how it was biblically and how it can be. You
Mhm.
know, Boaz stood in the gap for Ruth and said, "Don't nobody mess with her.
Yes.
When she comes to my field, she's protected. And all of you people who are not kind to foreigners, leave her alone, leave her be.
Hmm.
Let her eat, let her drink, let her
Yes.
find life, her and let her thrive." You know, and I'm like, there is another way.
Hmm.
There is a
Hmm.
humane way that it
Yes.
can be that we take care of those that are in need. Because that's
Hmm.
what that story is about loving
Yes.
kindness. It's
Hmm.
about that love that God has for us. All over
Yes.
the place, we see that. You know, Ruth's love
Absolutely.
towards her mother-in-law,
Hmm.
Boaz's love, and then we see God's love all surrounded in that
Yes.
story. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. I love that. Of course, he's also a portrait of Jesus in the Old Testament, like the Kingsman Redeemer, right? That's
Redeemer, yes.
yeah. So it's wonderful. It's beautiful. Well, I know that you are not only you are a counselor, you are specialized in trauma as a
Yes,
counselor, but you are also a minister
I
of the
am.
gospel. So
Yes,
this is wonderful. And this is your first book, right?
yeah, it's my first book.
It's
Yes,
well, tell me. I know that I've went to your website and I saw that that's your heart is to work with people that have gone through trauma. Tell
yes.
me, tell me what propelled you to write this book, Dula.
Oh, wow. I think when I began working with people with trauma, I started working in prison ministry. And then I went to Kenya and did a trauma conference there. And the more I did the work on trauma, the more I realized there needs to be more resources, real resources that touches people on the margins, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of resources that I've seen written are written for people who have who have resources, who have access to a therapist, who have access to, things here in the West. But I wanted to write a resource that's not only good for us here in the West, but also good out there for my sisters in Haiti, for my sisters in Kenya, my sisters in Congo, my sisters in Brazil. I
Yeah.
wanted to create a product that they all can tap into and feel seen instantly.
Mhm.
Um, by the contents of my book. And
Mm.
so that's really why I went there with the book and wrote the book.
And the subtitle is how God made us in the center of our trauma healing journey.
Yeah,
So when you, which I love it, of course, I do not believe that there's true healing without Him, because
yeah,
to me, all other healing is band-aid, because at the
yeah,
core of all of our pain is just
right,
our need to just be fulfilled or filled really with
right,
that piece of us that is missing until we meet Christ, right?
right,
And so I
right.
love it that you invite that. And what type of woman that you're writing this book for? So tell me one example of someone that I know that when you wrote a book, you thought about certain people. What
Yeah.
what have they been experiencing? What kind of trauma did you address or traumas?
When I was thinking of my audience, I once heard someone say, I wrote the book for me. And in some sense, I think I wrote the book and asked that question for me, firstly, right? When I look all over the world and I see children dying senselessly, and I see people not living to their olden age, like my brother passed 4 years ago, when I
Mm,
see, discrimination, when I see racism, when I see how they treat women, women of color are treated, Black women are treated, when I see women, um, with dealing with domestic violence and abuse and all of that. And people are just crying out to God. When I see those things, I'm like, okay, God, you know, do you see me? Do you see us crying out? And that question is a lament question. And so I wrote the book for me, for us to validate this question that we all have in common.
mm,
And I was shocked that this question, this Black woman has often for God, is a question that everyone has been resonating with.
mhm,
I've interviewed with white men, white women, Asian men, Asian women, and I've been in different conversations from people all over the world, and every last one of us need to pause to take a moment and say, that is the question that we all have this tension with,
mm.
right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think culturally, this is very important because when we talk about the culture, right, I think that there are certain groups, like, here in the United States, the African American group, Latinos, or different ethnicities in the
Yes,
country, where that question about invisibility, like for a lot of people for a long time, I think things are getting so much better, but they somehow felt invisible, right? the,
yes,
the rights were not the same, right?
right,
I mean, even women's rights, they are not that new, and women in
right,
general, right?
right.
And so I think that this there's a cultural layer of it, which uh
Absolutely.
we could address, the African Americans or other cultures like that feel invisible at times as a whole, or have felt in
Absolutely.
history. But I think you're right that we all sometimes we go through times in our lives that we feel like, am I invisible? Does God see me? Do you see me? Does anybody see what I'm going through?
Right,
Right?
right, right.
It-
Yeah, as a Black woman, it is not lost on me that there are um certain issues of bias and racial issues that are just specific to me.
Mhm,
There's a term that's often used, intersections. I have the intersections of a woman and a Black woman. So there are some things that will hurt me differently than it will hurt you,
mhm,
and at a greater level. And it causes me to ask, does God see me for different reasons?
mhm,
Right?
mhm,
It There are times when I sit and I'm looking at, yeah, and I'm a minister as well. That's another intersection
mhm.
that sometimes cause me to ask the question, does God see me? To be woman, to be
Oh,
and to be minister, that will
yes.
cause me to ask, does God see me,
Oh,
for
yes.
a host of reasons? So
Mhm,
it's not lost on me that we all come to God with this question for very unique reasons.
mhm,
And that's one of the things that's surprised me, because I was asking this question, does God see me, for my own unique and specific reasons. But when I sit with you and when I sit with others, I hear the question being asked for other reasons as well. And I'm like, praise be to God. Now we can talk. Now
yes.
we can sit at the table and listen to each other and
Mhm,
hear one another. And I do think pain connects us in such a way, if we slow down, if we allow the other person to speak of their pain and how they're hurting without dismissing, without you know, telling them that you know, their pain doesn't matter,
Wow, yeah.
or they're making it up, they're making too big of a deal about their pain. Just listen and just take it
Yes.
in and just validate. If we can allow that to happen and that space to take place, then we can have a beautiful, beautiful conversation about God and
Yes.
where God is at the center of our trauma healing stories. We can have a beautiful
I love
conversation,
that.
but we
You know,
need to give each other permission.
and oh, exactly. Open the door. Open the door. I have a sweet friend who, who she is living in Chicago now, but she's an African American lady, and we had some very different ideas politically, and she's a
Mhm,
strong believer.
mhm.
And I, we went to dinner one time, and I just wanted to hear her story. I want to hear,
Yeah,
what's your background? Where does your family come from? Why do you believe what you believe, even though like you are a believer? Where do you come from with your
yeah,
ideals, with your thoughts,
yeah.
politically speaking, and whatever? And we continue to not be of the same agreement politically at the
Mhm.
end of our conversation, but I saw where she came from. I saw her story. I heard her story, and
Yes,
it's I think that the issue is that a lot of people, they do not want to pause to put themselves in another person's shoes. I
absolutely.
cannot ever identify. If you say that you have certain traumas because of certain conditions that I have not experienced,
Right.
period, I cannot ever talk to you on the same level unless I try, at least with the best, to take
Mhm.
off the cap of whoever I am and try to walk in your shoes.
Right. Because
Right?
all you get to do is to believe them, to give each other the human dignity by
Yes.
believing one another, that I hear your pain. I
Mm-hmm.
hear that you suffered XYZ. I believe you. Because oftentimes, when people are not heard, when people are not believed, it disconnects us from one
Yes.
another. And I believe the greatest trauma that ever happened was at the garden. The biggest trauma that ever happened was at the garden. And what happened at the garden is that it disconnected us, it separated us from ourselves, from God, from one another. And so, what we see happening right now, presently, is that there's a great divide that's happening, you know, and we don't believe each other's stories. We don't believe that the people on the margins that are crying out, saying, I'm hurting, we don't want to hear it.
Wow.
We do not want to hear the pain that the other person is having, right? Because it, in some way, it offends us to hear the other person's story. But my pain shouldn't offend you, because it's just my pain. And as human beings, all we get to do when we hear people's pain is to feel compassion,
That's
to,
right.
to believe them and feel compassion, as Jesus, in his words, said he felt compassion for them.
Yes.
He felt
Yes.
compassion for them. That's what we get to do for each other as humans, because I think when we do that, we elevate each other's human experiences, that we're
Absolutely.
here and I see you and I feel compassion for what's happened to you. Now, I think another thing that keeps us away from feeling compassion for one another, because we feel burdened by fixing it just yet. I think before you can fix a problem, you have to feel compassion for the person first. You have to feel that the existence, you have to recognize the existence of the person first before you can even start strategizing. How do we fix this? How
Hmm.
do we deal with this? Where's the money going to come from? Who's going to pay for this? Before we can even ask these questions, we need to sit in the pain of we need to sit in each other's pain. We need to sit in it and just let the Spirit of God show us what to do while we're sitting in it, because I believe that God will meet us at the center of feeling compassion for each other's pain.
I love that. And I wish that everybody that is involved in decision making would do that, because we
Yeah,
know that if if God would, if people would invite, if it would
yeah,
be open to that, and not for their own gain, but
yeah.
rather to really, like I said, the day that I'm looking at this TV, and then for the first time, it's almost I was really seeing what was
For the
seeing what
first
was
time.
really going. There's all the talking
Yeah,
heads in the background talking about it, and I was just kind of like carried away into talking about it. And because I'm an immigrant too, but I did it
yeah,
legally, so it just, I mean, certain things are like little buzzwords for me. And
yeah,
but then all of a sudden it's like God just said, stop and look. Just
yeah,
see what this TV is showing you. And
yeah.
it was like a moment for me that I'll never forget,
And that's a
because
beautiful moment.
yeah,
That's a
it was like,
beautiful
in other
moment.
words, like, shut up and look at the souls.
Yes,
Just like, just
yes.
look at that and pray. You cannot do anything but pray for them, and pray for the government to make the right decisions.
You
Pray
have
for
to
the,
feel it
you know,
first. You have to
yes,
feel it
yes,
first. Yes.
yes, absolutely. Well, Julia, you talk about the largest misconception about what people believe about trauma. So, what is the largest misconception that people might believe about trauma, and how would you respond to them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you can you can get over it quickly, right?
Mm.
You feel it, you talk about it, now get over it. I think that's the biggest mistake we make in our society when it comes to people healing in general. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes intentionality. And even sometimes pray over it. It may not just heal instantaneously.
Yeah.
It will take time. And I think when we force healing on people, we re-victimize people.
Mm.
And people get stuck in their healing journeys when we force them and we tell them that, it's time to move on.
Mm. Oh my
It's,
gosh, that's profound. That's
yeah,
very profound.
yeah,
Because I mean, you may make that mistake even with your children,
yeah,
right? The people that you love the most is what I'm saying.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. When we tell them it's time to move on, when people are grieving, we tell them it's time to do this. It's time to to let it go.
Mhm.
Let it go. It happened so long ago. Let it go.
Wow.
And that further separates us.
Yes.
That thing that happened in the garden continues to happen when we tell people things like that. It further separates us. It keeps people stuck in their healing journey. It forces people to disconnect from God, even,
Mm.
because they're not being validated in their pain.
No.
When you validate someone, you're basically saying, I see you and I see you're hurting, and I'm here with you.
Wow. That's very, very powerful. And I just even think about myself. Um, Now, many as a in my 50s, and I start realizing of how much of the traumatic things that I've gone through in my teenage years, my childhood, how much of that was just like stuck under the rug. I just put it under
Mhm,
the rug.
mhm,
um Survivor mode.
mhm.
Don't talk about it, go on, and don't talk to anyone, and just keep on going. And you start realizing that a lot of your responses,
Yeah,
even though, like, I'm saved, that the Lord healed a lot of it, but a lot of the responses that I have today, some responses that you don't even recognize, like, gosh, why did I react that way? And you
Right,
realize it's because of things that were not processed way
right,
back when. So you are right. It
right.
takes time. It takes,
It takes time.
it may be
Healing
a
takes
lifetime,
time.
right?
Yeah, and some people are in it in a lifetime, but it doesn't mean when we treat trauma victims and people who are hurting and in pain with grace, compassion, love, we bring them close, we sit with them. That's part of the healing journey. That's part of
Mhm.
their healing, right? That's part of releasing them. That's part of freeing them and liberating them. But when the more we tell them they're not hurting, the more we tell them we don't believe them, the more we tell them move on from there, the harsh language that we use, it keeps people stuck
Mhm.
and it keeps people continuing to fight their battles alone. God did not create us to heal in silos. God called us to heal in community. In Genesis, was it Genesis 2 that God said it was not good for humans to be alone?
Yes.
So
Mhm.
there's a communal part of the healing journey that we need each other to validate our healing as we're moving forward. We need each other to validate that we're hurting, that we're in pain, that I see you and I will sit with you. So we need that validation from one another, and that validation heals. It does.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, I know that there are other books out there with similar topics, Gila, but what would you say that your book, like, how does it stand out from other titles?
Yeah, I've never
I do love the
read.
cover.
Yeah, isn't that
It's
beautiful? I
beautiful.
have never read a book like mine that that is so real with the trauma and ask the real questions. I feel like a lot of books that are written are giving um answers, and my question sits with questions.
Mm,
The title sits with questions, right?
mm-hmm.
And it sits with nuances. It sits with the mystery. You know, one of my friends call it the holy mystery. There are some things we don't have answers for,
That's right.
you know. And so in the book I create spaces to lament the things that we don't understand, because there are
Hmm.
some things we will never understand on this side of heaven.
So
There's
true.
the whole question, the theodicy question, why does God allow evil? We don't
Yes.
get that. I've heard all the theologians talk, I've heard all the pastors preach on this, and they give me their best editorials and their best summaries. I still don't get it, and I'm a minister myself. It still doesn't make sense, for the one that's hurting. The answer you give will not make sense, because you can't tell a mother who just lost her son, this is why it happened. Will that help?
No.
It will
Mm-mm.
not help. And
Yeah.
so for me, I believe my book validates that space. It
Oh,
validates that there are some things that we will never understand until Christ returns. There are some things that just won't make sense. At the same time, my book creates room for hope and joy in the midst of holding this nuanced space, this unanswered question, right? My book creates room for us to experience joy and to
mm-hmm.
have hope in the next day, in the new day. And I
Yes.
believe, there is a God. I believe we can see God in the trees, in the moon and stars, and even other people.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that. I also believe that God, because there is a God, and because I don't understand the God, but I'm still alive. So that means I get to wake up the next day and keep walking towards, you know, um, whatever the destiny God has for me,
Mhm.
keep walking, to keep living, to keep creating, to keep enjoying the fruits of God's labor. Like, we get to continue to live on in life, even when we don't have all the answers.
Right.
We get to
Yes.
experience joy and hope, even when we don't have all the answers.
Yes, and we can, and the other thing is we can look for the purpose, right?
Right,
Because we do know that God can turn even the worst things that you can go through in life
right.
if you if you follow the right perspective, and even though you're not going to have the answers, but
Mhm,
you can still find purpose to help
mhm.
others with what you have gone through, right?
Right,
And if nothing else, that brings a not an answer to the questions that there are
right.
no answers to, but a purpose, right? Like
Yeah,
a like, okay,
yeah,
I didn't suffer in vain. um
yeah,
there is this flower that came from from the cutting. There's something
yeah.
that came from it.
God can definitely redeem it. You know,
Hmm.
God can definitely redeem it. Um, that that's another area that I sit with often.
Hmm.
That is there purpose in everything that we experience. I don't think we will always understand the purpose for what we've experienced. I do know that God can redeem it, and
Yes,
God can change it, and God can give us opportunities to use what we've been through to help others.
absolutely.
However, and I say that I cringe a little bit saying that, because I'm like, well, God, you could have used another way for me to help another person. You didn't have to use pain, right? And I don't think
Yes.
God only uses pain. I think God uses other things to read to form us, to shape us, to redeem us. God also used beauty as well. Pain is not the only way. Um, but God can redeem pain. God has redeemed pain.
Yes.
God is making things, all things new. God is redeeming our pain as we're
Yes.
speaking. So there's hope. Yeah,
Yes, and it is. I think the most of all, it is his intention. It is his heart. It's his desire not to leave us hurting
right.
without a purpose, but rather to redeem, as you said, to redeem whatever we go through. Even
Yes,
though we know that a lot of the things that happen weren't caused by him. It was
right.
like but yet he allowed it to happen. And
Yes.
so I know it's a question that a lot of people sit with. I actually have a group of women that I do a Bible study at my home, and we almost every week we sit around that question, of
Yeah.
like, why does God allow the pain? Why does and
Mm,
I am with you. We certain things that we go through, we may die and not know why
did
we
not
went
know
through,
why.
but
Yeah.
yet that's not the response that God wants from us. Like, why, Lord? Why? It's
Yes.
more like, Lord, what do I do with it? Or what can
Yes.
you do with this?
Exactly.
And yeah. Well, I
Exactly.
love this. Well, Dieula, this is such a great conversation. As we get to the end of our talk, I just wanted to ask you, like, uh, who talk to a lady out there who looks at this title, Does God See Me? And she's like, you know what? Sometimes I do wonder that. Talk to that lady and
Yeah.
tell her how this book will help her.
I believe that this book, who for the woman who's wondering, does God see you? The answer is yes. God sees you just like God saw Hagar in the middle of the desert, um, at a place where she was close to dying, and God saw her. And Hagar was even in shock when God showed up. And I think the same thing God does for us is that he blows our mind when we least expect it, when we feel like we have no other place to turn to. And And when we feel that God has forgotten about us, I believe that's the perfect position for God to reveal himself to us.
Mm.
That's the perfect place. So yes, God sees you, and this book will help you see that.
Oh,
This book will help you journey, um, get on a journey of seeing how exactly God sees you. And this book doesn't give pat answers. I don't give pat answers. Um, I give um, I give a process.
mhm.
I offer a process for us to sit with, and so you can discover how God sees you. So for any woman out there who's wondering about the book, or even if God sees you, yes, God sees you. Get the book so you can journey with
Yes.
me, Hagar, and other women of the Bible inside the book. So yes.
That's wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
and Julia has given me a copy of the book to give to someone in my audience. All you have to do is go to my show notes and fill out the form, and you're gonna get into the giveaway, the contest to see if you get a copy of. But if you don't, any in any way, also a link to connect with her and to purchase this book is in the
Yes.
show notes. So do not miss it. This was
Yes.
such a blessing to talk to you.
Me too. Thank you, Patricia. I really appreciate the questions. You asked really good questions, and I appreciate you creating this platform to talk about some of the real things that we go through. So thank you for
Absolutely.
having me.
Thank you so much, and God bless you. I hope this is a very successful book that will help many women.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Patricia.
God bless you.
Yes, you too.
Bye.
Bye.